Okay, so how do we not have a gun?
Brem.
Okay, so hang on. I need to rewind. Rewind. What did we buy last round? We bought full armor and sheriff? Oh, that's not ideal. We don't want to buy this much, right? Because now we're stuck with 2,450 on this next round. Your teammates are going to have enough to buy next round. Or at least, and that is like the most ideal player, right? Is to have money on the third round when you've lost the first two or lost the first one. And if you do manage to win the next one with like limited like resources, like win and go 1-1, that's great. But I think we should not be investing on this round. Investing on the next round is better, right? Because think about it this way, right? You invested on this round, and the next round you'll invest about the same thing, right? What's going to be more likely to get you kills, though? Is it going to be buying a Vandal on the third round, or is it going to buy the Sheriff 2 times in a row? I think it's going to be that this on the third round. Because this gun is going to be way more impactful overall than a Sheriff is. When you're, like, for instance, like, one of the reasons why it's not good to buy on the second round, or not exactly one of the reasons, but it's one of the results of not people not buying on the second round, right? Is that there's actually like a decent amount of strategy you can do to get you kills on the second round, right? Something like buying a shorty, going sitting in a corner, or like finding a way to put yourself in a position to use a more specialist type weapon. The classic itself is a specialist type weapon. It's really good in close range when you can burst someone down and get 2 headshots in one. That's a really, really good time to use it. It's very similar to the shorty in that sense. You don't have to pay the money, but the shorty is more consistent in those ranges. There are ways to bridge the second round, so it even further like decentivizes that you invest on this round. Much more justifiably strong third round if you buy a Vandal, Phantom, whatever you buy. That isn't a Sheriff, then buying another Sheriff on the third round, basically. So there's multiple reasons why you don't want to be doing second round buy into third round buy. Okay, so looking back at this point I made in this coaching session, I think I could have done a better job, so I'm going to do a better job now. I think the first thing I did wrong in this explanation was I didn't really explain the underarching reasons or the underlining reasons of why you make the economic choices you actually do. I did think I did an okay job of that, and I think I was kind of like there, but I don't think I really explained it very well. So this is going to be my attempt to explain it very well, and hopefully I'll explain it better in the future when I do explain it to other students. So the reason why you actually manage your economy is to have higher probability of winning rounds. I know that sounds immensely basic, but it can be very complex in the way that you actually put it into practice. So for instance, if you save on the second round, you are purposefully lowering your chance of winning the second round so you can win the third round, because your economy will be better on that third round where you can invest more. So what was happening in this student's VOD is that the student was lowering their chance of winning the third round drastically, whilst only marginally improving their chance of winning the second round. So you can kind of see what I'm getting at here. I think a team to look at like the esports realm is G2 with their Stinger Boys on second round, because they are drastically increasing their chance of winning the second round, and they're not really decreasing their third round probability of winning that much. Like, they are doing it a bit. It's very clear that G2 think that they are gaining more from buying Stingers on the second round than they are from, like, in comparison to what they're losing when they can't fully invest in the third round due to the Stinger Boys, if that makes sense. And I'm inclined to agree G2, but I don't exactly have the reasons why they did it, but I have the reasons why I would do it and why I think it makes sense. So I don't really have any of the actual numbers for this because they don't really exist. I could technically pull the stats out of like Stinger second round conversion rates and that kind of stuff, but they're not really going to be that truthful to the actual theory of why you would do it. So I'm just going to use hypothetical numbers to kind of illustrate this thought process. So if we look at it like this, your economy is essentially a snapshot of your probability to win before a round starts. And obviously strategy plays a massive part in the reasons why we win a round, so the economy doesn't tell the whole story. And while it doesn't tell the whole story, it's going to influence your actual strategies, because if you have a judge, you're not going to go and play long range in mid. You're going to try and find some ratty corners, or you're going to try and find a way to play in a smoke or something like that, right? So the economy and the strategy are going to play off of each other in the way that you want to do things. If you want to do a certain strategy, you'll buy a certain gun. If you have a certain gun, you only have access to that gun because of economy restrictions, then you're going to employ certain strategies. So because you're restricted on the second round with what you can buy, it's very important to play around that fact. So buy a shorty, or make sure you've got enough smokes to use that shorty effectively. Make sure you have a dash so you can use that shorty effectively, or maybe just a classic. And even if you've got enough kills on the first round to then allow you to buy a sheriff on the second round whilst not compromising your third round, then you would try and find those mid-ranges. You may even have enough money to buy something like the Bucky or a Marshall, with the Bucky having a very strong close range one-shot potential, and the Marshall having the same but for long range, which can even beat out a Bulldog due to the Bulldog's fall-off damage range. Obviously, this is immensely situational and requires you to get enough kills on the pistol. These are just some examples of how your buy can affect your strategy, or how your strategy can affect what you actually want to buy. Even if you have enough money for a Marshall or a Bucky, you may not actually opt into that because you're going for a different strategy. So when I look back around to the buy phase being a snapshot of your probability to win a round, and I want to use G2 as an example of how we can use this to help ourselves and min-max ourselves throughout at least the first 3 rounds of the game. So if you lose the pistol, let's say there's a 10% chance that you win the second round. With good enough strategy, maybe you can raise that another 10%. So what G2 do is they buy stingers. And if they buy stingers, it probably improves the chance of winning by another 10%. And because of the fact that you have stingers now, it actually increases the ceiling of what the strategy is capable of. So maybe it increases that by another 10%. So you go from 10% to 40%, and bear in mind that this is completely hypothetical. So you've gone from 1090 to 4060, which is a significant increase. If G2 win this second round with stingers, it essentially creates a massive power shift, where the G2 players will be able to be on a bonus round and the enemy players will be on an eco round. And essentially what this does is it just flips the first 3 rounds on its head, where instead of winning the pistol, winning the second round, and then the other team generally wins the third round, so it becomes 2-1 in favour of the team that won the pistol, it essentially just switches it. So then the team that won the pistol get the pistol for 1 round, and then the G2 win the stinger round, and then they tend to win the bonus round. And that's if everything goes right. If things go wrong for G2, it actually is where this kind of gets interesting. So when G2 lose their stinger round, they actually go on an eco. So this eco is actually a bit different to the second round because they actually have more overall credits, so they can afford to expend more utility and buy bigger weapons, like usually you'll see them buy sheriffs. So essentially what G2 is doing is they're minimizing the differential between the percentage chance that each team will win. This is because the stinger mitigates a lot of the disadvantage you have on the second round, whilst buying on the third round doesn't necessarily mitigate a lot of the disadvantage you have versus the bonus weapons. So essentially what I take away from this is they try to push the resources into the second round to attempt to maximize their reward rather than actually mitigate their risk. And the reason why this is more of a risk is because they don't necessarily have the advantage on the snapshot of the buy phase in the stinger round. But specifically with G2, if we take into account the strategy past the buy phase, they tend to be able to convert these stinger rounds pretty well, really based on when they're doing it and how they're doing it. So the how is more in line with pro team strategies, which we can't really replicate, but the when we might be able to. There's only really 2 times you'll ever really do this, and that's if you're right at the start of the game and you know you'll have time to recover, although I would argue this is mainly reserved for pro teams. And the other one is at the end of the game when there's not really that many rounds left, and you want to min-max every single round, and you can't really afford to have a 1090 round. One thing that's also very important to note is that they only do this on attack, and the reason why they only do it on attack is because the team can generally play more together, and importantly the enemy team will have to be split up defending the map. They're essentially trying to find a 5v2 or a 4v2 to potentially find some upgrades on the site and get the bomb down. It does mean that they're actually weak to stacking, but it also means that the enemy team has to take a massive gamble to counter their strategy. I would love to know your thoughts surrounding this topic, and don't forget to subscribe. With all this in mind, I wanted to bring it back to the student VOD, where the student bought a sheriff on the second round and a sheriff on the third round. So the sheriff on the second round does increase the probability of winning the second round, but there's 2 main problems with it. The first one, and the most glaringly obvious one, is that you're jeopardizing the rest of your economy, especially for the third round. And the second reason, which is maybe less obvious, is that the sheriff is not a very specialized weapon. If you look at the guns at and around its price point, and even below its price point, there are certain strategies that make those guns exceptionally good and potentially even consistent to a certain degree. Opting into a sheriff on a round like this, you're essentially just asking to find headshots on players that have better guns than you, which is immensely unlikely. You're basically relying a lot on your mechanics, which is a very, very inconsistent way to attempt to win rounds. Like buying a shorty or sticking with the classic with an effective strategy can be a better way to consistently convert rounds. And the important things with those guns is that they're not going to jeopardize your third round economy. Okay, so that's it for the video. If you want to get coached, then please go and submit a VOD on my Discord, the link to which is in the description of every single video. My DMs are always open for asking questions about your actual coaching session or about Valorant itself. I read every single comment, so feel free to ask any questions in the comment section. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one.